Now to that debate on religion's role in America between Alan Keyes and Alan Dershowitz. In September, Mr. Keyes, a former Republican presidential candidate, and Mr. Dershowitz, an attorney, met at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The official debate question was, does organized religion have the answers to the problems of the 21st century?
I now call upon Professor Stanley Michalak, Professor of Government at Franklin and Marshall College and Director of the Center for Liberal Arts and Society at Franklin and Marshall. He will introduce our event and our speakers, and he will moderate the debate this evening. Professor Michalak.
Thank you very much. For those of us in this hall who are over 40, the Cold War looks in retrospect as a grand era of peace, stability, and tranquility. The dreams of a new world order emerging in the post-Cold War world have proven to be just that, dreams. 2 weeks ago, in the first event of this series, Robert Kaplan of the Atlantic Monthly delivered a dismal and dismaying State of the World address. What he presented was, in fact, a nightmarish future. Failed and unsustainable states that collapse into religious, ethnic, and civil violence, international conflicts spurred by rising population rates and inadequate resources, road warrior societies that collapse into feudal anarchy as borders become replaced by moving masses of people, and the planet increasingly preoccupied with the long-term effects of industrialization and population growth. At the same time, all of the chronic religious and ethnic conflicts of the Cold War remain with us today in Northern Ireland, in the Middle East, in Iran, in Iraq, in Cyprus, and in India and Pakistan. Then, of course, there's the state of America itself. Here at home, secular and religious forces battle over prayer in the public schools, the right of women to have abortions, the teaching of Darwin's theory of evolution, and the rights of gays and lesbians. Meanwhile, as we move into the area of globalization, we're witnessing the birth of a new America where private affluence and technological wizardry coexist with urban poverty, drugs, crime, violence, gangs, spiraling divorce rates, homelessness, AIDS, failing schools, and the profit-driven entertainment industry that has helped to deny our children the innocence of childhood. Tonight, two of America's finest minds will address these questions as they debate, does organized religion hold answers to the problems of the 21st century? The procedure will be as follows. Each speaker will open for 10 minutes. We will then have 12 minutes of rebuttal, and then we will have 5 minutes of closing statements. After that, we will take a short break for questions from the audience. When we take that break, if you have a question, write it on your index card, and the ushers will then bring them up to the gentleman seated at the table over here. Deans John Campbell, Dean Joseph Volker, and they will be joined by Dr. Bonchek. As this panel is furiously shuffling all of these cards and getting them ready, each of the speakers will ask of the other in turn 2 questions. Then we will have closing reflections. After we take the questions from the audience, we will have closing reflections from the speakers. So let us begin. We've waited long enough. Ambassador Keyes, for the affirmative. Oh, excuse me. One rule that's very important, our Dean John Campbell will keep the time. The yellow light means 1 remaining minute. The red light means you're out of time. Excuse me, Ambassador Keyes.
Thank you. Thank you and good evening. Now, I have to start out with one proviso, I guess, because I always have found when answering questions that it is sometimes necessary to do a little work on the question before you try to provide people with answers. And I would have to start this evening with a disclaimer, one which I offer partly because I think one ought to be kind of humble in the face of any efforts to predict what the problems of the 21st century are going to be. I mean, people wrote at the end of the 19th century about what the problems of the 20th century would be, and actually we have been through some awful horrors and some enormous tragedies and some great holocausts, none of which they foresaw. So it's not entirely clear that we have any idea what the problems of the 21st century will be. And I think that we can sometimes, maybe because turns of the century are times when people get gloomy, we can exaggerate too what they might be. Is the glass half empty? Is it half full? Are we on the threshold of enormous possibilities that will raise human beings to a golden upland of achievement? Or do we, in fact, face the horrors of a 21st century steeped in violence and chaos? Well, if human experience is any indication, we'll probably end up muddling along somewhere in the midst of all of that with some pretty horrible things and also some pretty great things. That certainly has been the case in the 20th century. So I'm not going to try to pretend that I can give you a catalog of the problems of the 21st century. I do see a challenge, though, that ought to be fairly evident to us, and that becomes increasingly acute because of some of the temptations that we give into these days. And that problem has to do, in fact, with some of the things that have produced the more positive aspects of the world in which we live. And right now, let us not deny it. For some of us, especially here in America, the world's actually pretty positive. We're living in the midst of a booming economy in which every day, it seems, some new figure is brought forward to show us how well off we are. Oh, declines in the poverty rate, raises in the median income, all these things just reported in the papers today as if to provide me with fodder for the opening of my talk. I don't know. That can't be all bad, can it? I doubt that it is. And what is all this the fruit of? In our political debates, we like to pretend it's the fruit of some great wisdom of this politician or that. I think we all know better, though. It is the fruit of the work and creativity of a lot of people here and around the world. It is the fruit of the application of a lot of new wisdom and understanding that we have achieved through scientific means. And it has put within our reach great powers, for good and ill, which at the moment are working themselves out in ways that open up great horizons of economic productivity and creativity as we, I think, are in the face of the possibility that we shall perform in the economic realm what we have done in the physical realm, tap into the very unit of social life, unleashing in greater measure the full potential of each and every individual to offer goods and services not just in the little scope of their life and community, but to the entire world with the push of a button. These are wonderful things. We also see the prospects in our researches into human biology and other things that we may, before too long, become master of greater territory with respect even to the function and makeup of our own bodies. Things that could offer cures to diseases and ways out in terms of our increasing disability in the face of old age. Wonderful prospects, not bad ones. Why we would want to sit here all preoccupied with gloom, I don't know, but I am not. I think in point of fact that vistas that are quite promising do open before humankind right now. But there is another side. A side that has been represented in the 20th century, of course, by things, some of which were obvious, like the shadow that nuclear weapons cast over the survival of the world, but some of them not so obvious in terms of the implications of that power that we are garnering to affect our own nature, to alter that substance which in the past was regarded as unalterable in the way that it came to us through our biology and from the hands of nature. Great powers. The thing that worries me, though, is not some catalog of individual problems we may face. The thing that worries me is what may be the greatest challenge of the era to come. The fact that our knowledge will continue to increase, but that there is a question mark behind the increase of moral wisdom and responsibility required in order to handle that knowledge without incredibly destructive effects. I think, in fact, that that's the great challenge of the era before us. that we will continue, no doubt, to reap the fruits of our science and to apply those fruits in ways that offer us greater power and greater control over things that in the past seemed beyond the reach of human individuals and human societies. Yes, I think this will continue. And I think that applying that kind of genius and creativity, we will open up possibilities to continue to relieve human suffering and spread greater abundance, as we have indeed. Oh, people talk overpopulation. I remember I grew up thinking everybody in India was going to starve, and now they export food to the rest of the world. We know for a fact that a lot of this gloom and doom stuff does not have to be. That we, in fact, have proven to ourselves the ability to apply with some measure of creativity that intelligence which God gave us to the challenges that we face. And I think we'll continue to do it. But we are also opening the door to possibilities that put into our hands powers that were unimagined in the past. Over the human spirit, over the human emotions, over the human mind and psychology. Things that would allow us to create, not only in the world, but in ourselves, monstrosities of human oppression. And that could introduce into our midst new bases for bigotry and prejudice that we have not yet begun even to explore. How are we going to handle these things as the weight of that responsibility which comes with knowledge grows ever greater in our midst? How will we do it? See, that's where I believe the question of the relevance of religion and faith presents itself in our time. Cast about as we will, I see that the last few decades of our existence are more like proof that as we move along these paths where our scientific understanding offers us greater knowledge, it seems that the effect to a degree of that understanding on our moral confidence has been to undermine and to shatter the foundations of our belief in the principles that even allowed us to believe that moral judgments are possible, much less that we can make them in any given circumstance. That means to say that as the call on our moral judgment grows greater, our confidence in those things that provide the foundation of moral judgment grows ever weaker. Except, of course, that there is an antidote. An antidote that still seems resilient, even in the midst of all our efforts to talk ourselves out of it. I've often wondered at this in a society that has, over the course of some decades, had an entertainment industry and a media and all kinds of other folks desperately trying in every possible way to convince us that only the unsophisticated would retain any sense of faith and due dependence on Almighty God. We yet live in a day when that sense of faith and due dependence on Almighty God grows. It does not decrease, it seems, in the breast of ordinary men and women in this country and around the world. There seems to be an antidote, perhaps writ by the finger of God on our very hearts, that provides us with a sense that even as we become more God-like in our capacities, we yet become less godlike in our ability to be clear in our understanding of the meaning and proper use of those capacities. It is humbling. And that's why I think faith is a relevant thing. See, because when you stand on the threshold of an era when the greatest temptation will be to take overweening pride in your seeming achievements and to regard them with a sense of self-sufficiency that releases you from the boundaries of ordinary moral judgment. What could be more necessary in such an era than the humbling and limiting acknowledgement that there is in fact a God and we are not Him? I think that essential element of religious faith and belief becomes ever more necessary to our existence and indeed to the survival of humanity in the course of the century to come. And it's not because we're going to be faced with terrible problems of people who are hungry and nations collapsing and chaos. I mean, meaning no offense to anybody, but I believe you could probably stand at the threshold of any century in human history, and being as how we could then have some foreknowledge, you would probably say, well, they faced these terrible difficulties. No, the challenge that we face is not whether we will be able to meet the particular problems, but whether our pride in our capacity to find solutions for those problems by means of our science and understanding will in fact release in us the demon of pride that frees us from a sense of moral boundary.